My name is Emily Herring. I'm the naturalist with Marshall County Conservation, and I work out of the Grimes Farm, which is located on the southwest side of Marshalltown. If you've never been out here, we always encourage you to come out and explore the trails. So this is a new opportunity for us to do programming a little bit different than what we have done in the past. The Brown Bag is a program that we usually offer over the lunch period, and we have presenters. So if you ever have a lunch break and you want to come out and you learn about different topics that are related to nature, sometimes we have wildlife photographers, biologists, all different topics to help you learn more about the environment over your lunch break. Now, normally these programs are done in person here at the Nature Center. However, to help keep everybody safe, the next couple programs will actually be done via video. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to me here at the Nature Center. My email address is eherring@marshallcountyia.gov, or my phone number at the Nature Center is 641-752-5490. So this program was actually supposed to be held this spring before our COVID changed our world quite a bit. And so we decided just to carry this on over into the summer months. And it is about backpacking. Now, backpacking is something that I have now been doing close to 20 years, and I truly enjoy doing it. I do not consider myself an expert by any means. However, I've gone on many trips and have led a few trips as well. However, there's always something I learn. So to be an expert, I feel like you have to know everything, and that I just do not feel like I qualify for. So backpacking is something I am passionate about, and I'm excited to share my experiences with you. When thinking about this program, the first thing I did was I sat down and I wrote down each of the trips that I had ever been on, because I've been on enough that I kind of blend some together and I forget about some. And each trip is unique in its own way, and I've always learned something about it, and that's going to be the big thing that I talk about during this program. The first thing people always ask me is, why do you backpack? It definitely is something that is challenging and unique, and not a lot of people do it. And so when they ask me that question, there's not really an easy answer for me, because there's lots of reasons why I backpack. Probably one of the best things about it is that it is very satisfying to me. I love the feeling of knowing that I am able to carry everything on my back, that I'm strong enough to be able to carry everything on my back that I need to be able to survive. It is a very gratifying feeling to be able to do that. I also enjoy backpacking because it helps me realize that in this world of shopping malls and Targets and all of those places, that you really don't need that much stuff to be able to survive. It really shows that you can live a simpler life, and that helps ground me when I am in backcountry. Another thing that I really get out of backcountry is knowing that I'm going places that most people in this world will never get to see, whether or not they have the ability, or something that they don't want to do, or just don't know how to do it and don't get the opportunity to learn how to do it. So to go and sit on top of the Continental Divide and watch elk run across a mountain valley is something that I know most people will not get to see, and the fact that I have gotten to see it makes me appreciate the ability to go backpacking, and also appreciate the natural world around me. It is humbling to know how small we really are in this world. And so backpacking is something that helps to ground me, not only knowing that I can simplify my world, but also that I'm a small part of a bigger system. So those are just a few of the many reasons why I like to backpack. So my backpacking story started when I was in college. I grew up in a family that car camped and hiked, and we visited national parks and would go to Colorado and Minnesota and places like that to explore. However, no flushing toilets was out of my mother's comfort zone, and so you weren't going to get her to go into backcountry. And so backpacking was something that I kind of knew about, but became more aware about when I was in college. I went to Iowa State University, go Cyclones, and there was an outdoor gear store there called Jack's. And if you ever have been to Ames, Jack's was around before there was Shields or Sportsman's Warehouse or Bass Pro or any of those places. So really, it was the best outdoor gear store in central Iowa. And so I would go there quite a bit to buy some things, but more than often it was just to covet the things that were there because a poor college student couldn't afford them. And I always eyed the backpacks, and I really wanted one, but I didn't know how to backpack. I didn't know anyone who did backpack, and so I literally would just kind of dream about backpacking. Then I met my now husband of 16 years, who actually had been backpacking a couple of times before. And as some may say, the rest is history. I think that he was excited to find a woman, or girl at that time, I would say, that was excited to love the outdoors and go backpacking with him. And so he picked up on that right away, and we started talking about going backpacking together. And we've been on many trips since. So that Christmas of my senior year, I got a backpack for Christmas from my parents, and then my husband bought me a backcountry sleeping pad. And that was that's the first present he ever gave me, was a backpacking sleeping pad. And we ended up buying sleeping bags and a tent that spring and started planning our first backpacking trip. So looking back on it now, I realize how amazingly lucky I am that Glacier National Park was my first park that I got to go backpacking in. But before we got there, I was pretty anxious and nervous about going backpacking. It seemed like something that is hard, and it is hard, but to have everything I need on my back, be able to be in the wilderness, go to the bathroom, in a hole, lots of things that you don't normally experience in a day-to-day that you do when you backpack. And so I convinced my husband that I wanted to do a trial run. Well, here in Iowa, there's not a lot of topography or mountains to say, but I wanted to be able to know that I could carry everything on my back for about as long as we were going to go hiking for, and that I can set up a tent, sleep in a tent overnight, and do all of that before going into a national park. So we set up a weekend to go down to southern Iowa and hike in an area that was pretty large that we could make lots of paths through, and figure out if it was something that I was comfortable doing and if it was something that I could do. And so we went to the area, and it was southern Iowa, beginning of June probably, and we got all of our gear loaded up, packed up. We were just going to go in for one night, come back out, just that knowing I could do it. And so we loaded up our backpacks and we got all ready to go, and we hiked in. About 5 minutes in, we're looking down, and our pant legs are moving, and it's not our legs that are moving. There's probably hundreds of ticks on our legs. And I have to admit, it's the only time as a naturalist that I've had that experience. And so we look down, and we have to stop about every 3 minutes to wipe the ticks off of our legs so they don't keep crawling up our bodies. It still gives me the heebie-jeebies to this day. But we got about a mile in and thought about what the tent would look like with all these ticks on it. If we camped overnight, them knowing that they were there, and we just couldn't do it. And so we turned around and hiked back out, and that was my training for Glacier National Park. I can tell you Glacier National Park went much better than that. So we drove out to Glacier National Park in July. It was actually over the 4th of July weekend. And you think here, hot, warm summer in Iowa, July. But Glacier was just opening up. One of the trails that we hiked opened up 2 days before we got there because the snow was so heavy, and that's the temperature. And the daytime temperatures were in the 70s, beautiful. And at night, it got into the 30s. So it was chilly at night, warm during the day, but beautiful hiking weather. And so we got to Glacier National Park. We picked up some bear spray as the demands of my mother. And we got our permits. Oftentimes when you go backpacking, you have to get your permits in advance because they only want so many people in backcountry, so it's not lessening the quality of the adventure. And so we picked up our permits and got all of our gear and our food ready and started to head towards Gunsight Lake. Now, this is something I have learned, and actually it's made me a much better person in backcountry, is that I learned that my husband, who is an amazing map reader, hands down an amazing map reader, I think was trying to lessen my nervousness about going into backcountry and decided to not be 100% honest on the length of the hike. And so I don't remember how many miles he told me it was. I do know that it was actually 2.5 miles longer than what he said. And so it took longer than expected to get in, and I think there were some stern discussions about how far is this hike really. But I learned that I needed to read the map. And I learned I needed to know how to read the map anyways for other reasons. So map reading was something that I needed to become stronger in after this first hike. Now, Glacier National Park is an amazing park if you've never been there. It is so vast, so large, and the peaks are beautiful. Every corner you go around are views and of the most spectacular picture you could ever take. You will have to forgive my photos though, because this is with a regular camera. This is before digital cameras. And so the pictures aren't as high of quality. My husband and I were looking through the pictures and laughing about our quality of pictures that we took. And digital cameras definitely help. But anyways, we're in Glacier, we've got our camera, we're hiking along, taking pictures. And it is vast, it's big. And lots of times when you're hiking, the forest around you is so dense, lots of times huckleberries and beargrass and all these different plants that you really can't see what's next to you. And I would have to say it was an uneasy feeling when we're coming upon hikers and they're like, grizzly bears up ahead, grizzly bears up ahead. Just be talking, don't worry, there's grizzly bears up ahead. And we'd walk up ahead and there were no grizzly bears to be seen. But you also couldn't see farther than 3 feet into the woods next to you. So knowing that there were creatures much more powerful, much stronger, right next to you was very humbling and nerve-wracking. But the views and the experience was mind-blowing. So we hiked to our lake and we got to Gunsight Lake, and Glacier National Park has designated campsites. So you have campsites, and we set up our campsite. And Glacier also, because of the bears, has a different setup than some of the other national parks that I've been in, as well as wilderness areas. And that is that they have a designated cooking area. You're actually supposed to cook in a different area because of the food smells. So you want you to leave your food smells there and not bring them back to your tent. In some areas, they encourage you to wear different clothes. In fact, than the clothes that you cook your food in, to prevent bears to be attracted to campsites. So there was an area to cook our own food, and then there was an area to bear bag. And I don't know what it is about bear bagging, but it always involves laughter. I have never had a bear bagging experience that went really, really well or was super easy. Nowadays, you can take bear cans, which are plastic cans that bears can't get into. But at that time, Glacier National Park had bear bagging areas, which was really nice because sometimes parks don't have that and you have to find trees. And it can be hard to find a tree that is right for bear bagging because it needs to be a certain distance away from the trunk so the bears can't reach it, and it has to be a certain distance up. So they had this bear bagging pole, and you'll notice from this picture that it ran between 2 trees. And we put our food in our bag and got ready to toss it up there, and Joe did it. I'm not responsible for this, but you'll notice that our food bag got stuck in the tree instead of actually going over the bear pool. With some jerking, we were able to get our food out and we were able to eat. However, we just couldn't help but laugh hysterically at the fact that it was stuck in a tree. Our food was stuck in a tree. So not only did we keep our food away from the bears, we kept it away from ourselves too. But anyway, so there was an area to bear bag, and then Gunside Lake was a beautiful lake. When we arrived, there were many waterfalls from spring melt running into this lake, and the lake was ice cold, frigid, crystal clear, beautiful colored rocks underneath. Joe spent some time fishing for rainbow trout there. There was a suspension bridge that went over the lake that came out, and the views were just amazing and remote. We were in a campground area, so there was actually a place where 4 different tents, I do believe, could set up, and so there were other campers there, and we had visitors to our campground. And those were deer. Although when you're sitting at your campsite and you can't see farther than 3 feet away from you and you hear rustling in the trees, your brain can't help but wonder about grizzly bears. And these deer actually would come to the campsites and they would chew and tear tents and backpacks and things like that because there was a lot of salt from people's sweat in those backpacks. And so we were constantly worried about the bears, but the threat really was the deer that were eating the tents and backpacks. And they tore a neighboring tent's tent actually that night, and they had to duct tape it back up. But so those deer were in search of minerals and nutrients from the humans. So we camped overnight, and I'd like to say that it was a good night's sleep, but it wasn't because I was cold. From this picture, you'll see that I am in a sleeping bag. It is a 0-degree sleeping bag, so I was nice and toasty. I also wore stocking caps and gloves and long underwear. It dropped down into the 30s, mid-30s that night. So it was a cool night. No bugs really we had to worry about. But there is that grizzly bear factor in backcountry, bear factor in general in backcountry sometimes you have to face. And so I slept with one ear open that night. And so I didn't get the best night's sleep, but I did sleep some. And the next morning I slept in and it was beautiful. And we had breakfast and we just stayed in backcountry one night. And if I was to do it all over again, obviously I would stay longer. But I was nervous about just the one night. And if my husband has taught me anything about leading groups into backcountry is that you always leave people wanting more. So if you've backpacked before, or if you want to go backpacking, don't overdo it. Just try it first and maybe do a night or 2. Because if you don't like it, or something doesn't go quite right, or the weather's not perfect, or something it just throws things off, it's really important to be able to leave on a good note. Don't exhaust yourself. Don't overdo it. And then you'll know if you like it, and then you can go in again and you have more confidence, and it challenges you, and you can challenge yourself that time. So my husband left me wanting more, and we hiked out. Again, there were a lot of discussions about how to be honest about the amount of mileage, but we got out and it was wonderful, and we never saw a grizzly bear. My parents spent 2 days in front country in Glacier National Park, the same time we were there, and they saw multiple grizzly bears, and we never saw a single one. So that was my very first backpacking experience, and the night sky and the clear mountain waters and the waterfalls and the sounds and the smells of backcountry had me hooked. As I mentioned earlier, as a naturalist, I've been lucky enough to teach other people my passion about going backpacking. And I've taken 3 high school groups now backpacking. Anyone who thinks that might be a vacation, to take 10 high school kids backpacking and making sure that they survive in a wilderness setting, I would challenge you to volunteer and volunteer for your local county conservation board and see if they need help leading backpacking trips. But they're always amazing experiences. And maybe that's part of backpacking that I like about it. They're challenging, but at the end, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. So I've had the opportunity to take high school kids to the Rocky Mountains and Smoky Mountains and the Porcupine Mountains, and they've all been fun opportunities, and you get to see students and youth really love nature. So when I think about one of my favorite experiences when I led students, I have to think of Rocky Mountain National Park. It was the second trip that I went on, and I was working at Story County Conservation at the time, and I led the trip with Heather Huckey. And Heather still leads backpacking trips. This year, they're not able to go, but it's something that she's very passionate about and loves to do. And so we had taken these high school kids up to a campsite called Ditch Camp, which is not a very exciting named camp. And the views aren't amazing from Ditch Camp, but it is a great campsite. And there's lots of wonderful hikes from that, including one up to the Continental Divide Trail, which I talked about earlier, being able to see the elk run across the valley. And on that way up, we came across a kind of a snowy area that hadn't melted yet that summer. And maybe it doesn't melt, I don't know. But I will have to admit, I was hesitant and let other people go first, but Heather started sledding races down the mountain snowpack. And the kids would wrap their raincoats around their waists, put them on kind of like diapers, and then they would race each other down the snow. And I did do it once, and it was really fun. And that memory will always stick with me. And those kids, those high school kids, acting so young and enjoying nature in its own way was awesome. So when you're in backcountry, you need to be cautious. You need to be aware, but you also need to experience it. So whether that be soaking your feet in an ice cold mountain stream, or even going swimming in a mountain lake just to feel how cold it really is, or sledding in the snow or climbing on rocks, be aware of the hazards, but also take adventures and take risks. So my last backpacking trip is hands down the most nerve-wracking trip I went on. I went on a backpacking trip with 6 other women, strong women, smart, wonderful women. And backpacking was something, again, I had a son, and I wanted to get back into wilderness. I wanted to feel that connection again. And so I asked some of my friends that I know weren't experienced backpackers. Some of them were, but some that were not. And I wanted to share that passion with them. I wanted them to have that opportunity. And so I offered it out to 6 ladies, thinking that maybe 1 or 2 would be like, yeah, I'll go. Yeah, that'd be great. Well, all 6 said they wanted to go. So we decided that we were going to hike Indian Peaks Wilderness Area, and we got a permit to the area, and a certain area that you have to hike in, and you have to camp in. And from the map, there looked like there were quite a few places to camp. And so we kind of picked out different areas that we thought we could camp on the way up, depending on how far people wanted to go or felt comfortable going. Because, like I say, you always want to leave people wanting more. And so I was the map reader, and we hiked along, and every campsite area that I thought we would hike in became obvious that it was not a good site to camp. There was a camp area at the very end of the trail, which would have been the farthest way we could go. And it was going to be a good day's hike. I think it was like 7 or 8 miles. And I was a little nervous about pushing people to go that far because I wanted them to have a good time. And so, but it became obvious pretty early on in the hike that we were probably going to have to get there. And we did. We hiked and we talked and we took breaks and we drank water and shared snacks, cheered each other on. And we got there and we set up camp. We had amazing weather. We did great day hikes exploring. We had moose not far from camp, great water source. And it truly was an amazing backpacking trip. I could not have asked for it to go any smoother or better. We stayed for a couple of nights and then hiked out. And my friends loved it. And I breathed a huge sigh of relief once we got out. But we did it, and plans to go backpacking again soon. As soon as we can, actually. We've been plotting about where we're going to go and how we're going to do it. So sharing that passion was priceless. And so no matter if you'd go backpacking or not, or if you become backpacker or not, it's important that you do share those passions that you have with other people. So lesson learned, share your passion. Even if it's not backpacking, share your passion with other people. So here I am telling you about my amazing experiences and having a great time and the lessons I've learned. But to do this, you have to be prepared. If you're interested in backpacking, the first thing I would suggest you doing is maybe going through an outfitter or finding someone who has the gear and borrowing it from them. Or look at your county conservation boards or county conservation boards across the state. Oftentimes they offer different programming, whether it's adult backpacking or youth backpacking, because it isn't for everybody. And to buy all the gear is expensive. So make sure you experience first, rent it, experience backpacking, make sure it's something that you really want to do. And if you can go with a group, then it takes a lot of the planning out of it. You can see how it works. So when you plan future trips, you kind of can know what to expect. So going with someone who's experienced is really important, and I would strongly suggest it. And there is quite a bit of gear to be able to have to accumulate, and I'm going to go over that here in just a second. But I would say, hands down, if you can, go with someone who has experience, go with an outfitter, so you don't have to get your own gear or find your own gear, and just try it. Go easy, don't go overboard, pick an easy trip, and see if it's something that you like. So when you plan your trips, you have to really look into the areas, because different areas have different rules and regulations. So kind of figure out where you want to go, and then research that area. Research the weather, research the trails, research permitting options. I will tell you right now, permits are sometimes hard to get. So when it says you could get your permits the 1st of May, call and get your permits the 1st of May. So lots of times a backpacking trip isn't just throwing your gear in your backpack and going. You actually have to plan and really think about what you're going to be doing. So really research your area, research hazards, if there's any poisonous snakes, grizzly bears, anything like that in the area, and how you need to act around them as well. So research your area really well. Test your gear beforehand. Don't do what we did in Glacier. Make sure your gear works and that everything fits right, and that you have everything that you need. You may find that there's gear that I suggest taking that you really don't want to take and you don't use. And that's important that you know, okay, this works for me. What works for you is more important than what an expert or what someone else says. You have to know that, but you have to test it first to know. Don't think, oh, I really don't need a sleeping pad, and then get into backcountry and realize, yeah, sleeping pad really helps insulate me off the ground. It helps keep me warm, and it's not so comfortable sleeping on pine cones. So test your gear beforehand, pick a place and research it. Whenever you're going out into wilderness, nature, even out for a walk, always tell somebody where you're going and when you'll be back. So if something happens, then everybody knows where to look for you, and we can get help to you, and sharing that information. That is key.
So I have brought along some supplies that I would take to use backpacking, and I thought I would just go over them briefly. There is so much backpacking gear out there today, and you can become an ultralight backpacker and carry very little stuff, or I would call this more comfortable backpacking is what I prefer to do. So I'm okay carrying the extra weight as long as I have all my supplies with me. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go through supplies and what to think about when you're getting them. And then if you have any questions, like I said before, you can always reach out to me. So this is the backpack that I got. Its brand is Osprey, and I love it. My first backpack there was not any female backpacks out there, and so there are a lot more variety, like I said earlier. This backpack's kind of awesome because it actually has an adjustable frame, so this can go up and down depending on the length of your torso, and so makes fitting a backpack a lot easier than before. There are external frames, or the ones that have the metal frames. Most backpacks you see for sale today are the internal frames, which means that the hard metal part of the backpack or plastic now oftentimes, is actually inside the backpack. This backpack has some special features to it. The top can come off and be a day pack, which is nice if you're doing day hikes when you're in backcountry. It also has a place where you can put your bladder, so you can put a water bladder in there and it makes it easier to access water. If you're going to go and purchase a backpack, make sure you just try it on and make sure it fits you comfortably, and have the person in the store make sure that it fits you appropriately before you purchase it. You'll need a tent, a backpacking tent, or a very lightweight tent. This is actually just a one-person tent, and I think it weighs about 3 pounds. So a nice light tent. There's different seasons on tents, so depending on when you're doing your backpacking or where you're going to, you want to make sure that you have a tent that can handle cold temperatures if you're going into cold areas. So you have your tent. This has poles, stakes, and the footprint, which is the piece of fabric that goes underneath the tent, all in that one bag. This is actually my sleeping pad. It is an inflatable one. There are lots of different types. There's self-inflating ones by Thermarest. Definitely get them out in the store and lay on it. If it doesn't feel comfortable in the store, it's not going to feel comfortable in backcountry. This is nice because I like the size of it. The Thermarest sleeping pads are wonderful as well. They have great warranty. So a sleeping pad is a must, not just for comfort, but also it helps keep you insulated and off the ground so you don't get cold in the night. A sleeping bag, a backpacking sleeping bag. This isn't just a regular bag that it comes in. I strongly suggest stuff sacks so you can actually compress them down and get them much smaller into your backpack. They're degree rated, so you want to make sure that wherever you're going, if it is going to be 0 degrees at night, that you have a 0-degree sleeping bag and that you can keep yourself warm. One thing that I splurge on is a pillow. I always take a backcountry pillow because you can use your clothes that you fold up in a ball or put in a stuff sack. It just makes a huge difference for me to get a good night's sleep, and to do that I need a pillow. So this hands down is probably the #1 gear when it comes to backpacking. You need a good pair of hiking boots. Some people wear shorter shoes and that's fine, but support on your ankle is really good. I have struggled with blisters my entire life, as I've said before in the video, and I took the time really to get a good fitting pair of boots the last time I went shopping, and they were more expensive than I would have liked them to be, but I have only gotten 1 blister with these pairs of boots, and so getting a good fitting pair of boots is huge. And then breaking them in. Don't wear brand new boots onto the trail. You'll be sorry if you did. So here is some of my basic cooking stuff. I take a pot into backcountry, and then each person gets a cup and a spoon. And that's really all I take, and you can be able to fix the meals just in these few things. After food is fixed, we have actually a collapsible sink. It gets quite small. There's specific soap that you can take into backcountry that's good for not getting certain chemicals into the environment. And then I usually just use a piece of nylon net and then a quick drying towel. A quick drying towel is nice to take into backcountry if your gear's a little wet. When you wake up and pack up in the morning, you can always kind of wipe it down with that to help speed up the drying process. Over here you'll find a stove. We use white gas stoves. There's all different types of stoves out there too. Some you can screw directly onto a propane bottle, a little miniature one. So there's lots of different types of stoves out there. This is one we've had now for 20 years and it works wonderfully, and so if it works, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So this is a stove, this is the fuel bottle, and you need to kind of calculate how much fuel you think you'll be using. If you're going into an area that's hot and you maybe not cooking so much hot food, you might not need as much fuel. Or if you're going somewhere cold and at the end of the night you're going to want to have a cup of tea or hot cocoa before you go to bed, then you're going to need more fuel. You definitely want to bring along matches, lighters. We usually bring along multiple sources of a spark just in case to help make sure that nothing goes wrong. So I have some waterproof matches here along with a lighter. Usually if it's 2 people going in, my husband and I both bring a lighter along with some waterproof matches. So we make sure we have plenty of materials to start the stove. Lots of times in backcountry you can have fires because of the amount of damage that fires does in the backcountry, not just wildflowers, but the amount of damage it does to the land where the fire is held. Also, when you're in places that are very, very arid or they're having droughts and they're worried about fires, they won't allow fires either. And so that's something when you look into your places to stay, look at the rules and regulations to make sure. Here is a dehydrated food meal. These you can get at any sporting goods store and even in Walmart now. And they're quick and easy, and lots of times if we're doing a quick trip in, that's what I choose to use. But you can get creative with your meals, and there's tons of recipes out there that I suggest you looking into. A water bottle is huge. Usually I take in 2 water bottles plus my bladder. I like Nalgene bottles on the sheer fact that they have a mouth that hooks up to a lot of different types of water filters. Now, water filters, hand down, are a very important part of going backpacking. There's lots of different types of ways to filter water. I have the rule of thumb that I always take in 2 ways to filter water. So in case something goes wrong, then I have a second way. If you're going with a larger group, you want to have multiple filters anyways, because it does take a while to filter water. So these are 3 different ways to filter water. You can also boil water as well, but that doesn't necessarily remove the sediment and the dirt from the water. So what we've got here, this is a hand pump water filter. So this part of the filter goes into the water, this goes into the Nalgene bottle, and you pump the water through, and then it goes into your Nalgene bottle and fills it up. It has a ceramic filter, and this makes it so the water's safe. It removes bacteria and all different types of organisms that can cause harm when you're drinking water in the backcountry. It is super, super, super important that you do not drink water out of the backcountry, even if it's crystal clear and beautiful. If beavers are in the area, giardia is scary. We call it beaver fever, but it causes lesions in your intestine and, of course, bad cases of diarrhea and makes you very ill. Lots of times in my kind of first aid emergency kit, I will bring along iodine tablets. They help to treat the water in case the filter breaks down, or maybe the filter gets clogged or something happens to the filter. This will just as a backup. It's not good though to drink this long term, because it can cause, it's not good to introduce those chemicals constantly into your body. This is when I go into backcountry with large groups. It's a wonderful gravity filter. So you fill up one bag, you hang it higher than the other bag, and the water runs through this part, which is the filter, and it filters the water in large quantities. So you can filter over about 4 liters of water in just a few minutes. So it's pretty slick and pretty easy, and it's probably one of my favorite filters. The only thing is if you're in an area where there's not large water to be able to scoop water out, it can be difficult to use. So sometimes we will take this, sometimes we'll take the pump filter, depending on what the area is like and what kind of water sources there are. So I talked about in my video about how you needed to be able to read a map, taking a compass and a good topographical map. So a topographical map shows you the lines of elevation gain, the trails, water bodies. It's important to have a good topographical map, a good map to go into backcountry when you are exploring. One thing I bring a lot along are bandanas. Bandanas are great for keeping your hair back, washing, using as pot holders on hot pots. They're also good for straining out extra food. If you're washing your dishes and there's floaties of food in the water, I use one usually to strain out that food. That way I don't attract pests or bear to the campsite. So bandanas have multiple uses. They can be used in case of an emergency if you have a cut and things like that. So I usually bring at least 2 along just in case. So this is a shovel to go to the bathroom, as well as toilet paper. In backcountry, you need to practice leave no trace, and that's not something that I have time to cover here now, but definitely if you're going into backcountry, learn about how to take care of your waste and how to leave as small of imprint on the environment as possible. A couple other things: a pocket knife, a headlamp for nighttime, bug spray, sunblock, chapstick, toothpaste, toothbrush, first aid kit with good blister gear. I am always taking good blister gear because I am prone to blisters, whether that's moleskin, second skin, ways to hold that blister stuff in place. So a good first aid kit to be able to fix up any small injuries that may occur. And a piece of rope. The rope gets used a lot for a lot of different things, whether it's bear bagging or supplying or hanging up a tarp or hanging up your tent to let it dry. A piece of rope is really important to be able to take into backcountry. So this looks like a lot of stuff. Oftentimes, you know, you go with other people, so you're able to divide this up. You also need to bring clothes. You'll notice I didn't have really any clothes in here. You'll need good rain gear. A nice hat is important. And then clothes that dry quickly. Staying away from cotton is important. Cotton comes from a plant. A plant sucks up water, and they don't let go of that water very quickly. And so it's important that you don't wear cotton-based materials. There's a saying that cotton kills, so you wear materials made out of plastic or wool, animal material, and that will help keep you warm even when you are wet. So this is just some of the basic gear, and there are so many different types out there. Definitely do your research if you're going to be purchasing stuff, because depending on what you're doing and where you're going, there is a huge variety of options out there. So I strongly suggest you doing research before you purchase, and also trying it out in the store. If you're going to be buying a tent, set it up in the store and see how easy is it to set up. Sometimes you have to set your tents up pretty quickly. So I would strongly suggest being able to set that tent up in the store and see, is it easy to set up? If it's easy to set up, then that's something that you'll want in a tent. So again, there's lots of different ways you can go with gear, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me about backpacking. Thank you so much for listening to my stories about backpacking, and I hope maybe it gets you just a little bit excited to learn more about backpacking, maybe try it yourself, or maybe you just enjoyed the pictures and the stories and had a little time to relax this afternoon. So have an awesome day, and hopefully our paths will cross soon.